Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hope. My name is Tammy Lynn Connors. This is my YouTube channel and podcast, Helping Other People Evolve. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Tater. How are you today, Tater?
I'm doing swell. I don't use that word often, so I'm gonna break it out to you. I'm doing swell.
I love swell. That comes from maybe Bobby Brady or Richie Cunningham, one of the two.
One of the two, one of the couple of them. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So I came across Tater on TikTok. Well, actually, my friend Sue did, and she said, "Hey, this probably be somebody that has a great story." So I reached out to Tater. You're in Nashville?
Yes, I've been here for a year. Yeah.
Oh, a year. Okay, where were you at before that?
I was in Kansas City for 7 years, and before that, I grew up in Illinois. Way back in the day when I was a little tater tot, before I could remember anything, my dad was in the army, so I was born in Oklahoma, and then went to Germany, then Georgia, then Illinois, and then my parents split. So my mom was from Missouri, and we were about 10 minutes out of St. Louis in Illinois, called Granite City. There was an army base there. It's no longer operational. They sold off the land, and they have like some reserves there. But that's about it. And then I grew up there and left in 2013, and I've not been back to Illinois since. And I don't think I'm going back.
Funny that you say that. I was just telling you that I moved to Texas and I went back to Michigan. Right, I was right on the Michigan-Ohio border, and I went back last week to get the rest of my stuff. And I was like, I cannot wait to leave here. I am so done with this area. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like that sometimes when you leave. Like if you've spent a long time in a certain place, and I just love Kansas City, and there's a lot of born there, live there, die there type people, and they love that city, and I love it too. I mean, I'm not knocking Kansas City at all, but I can see why some people do love where they're living, and I see why some people live there for a certain amount of time and they're gone.
Right.
They don't want to go back.
Yes, yes. So, real quick, I just want to share a little bit about what my mission and vision with Hope is. I started this just hoping that I can help people who feel like they're alone in their struggles. We go through life and there's so many people that feel like they struggle all alone and nobody is going through anything but them. And we share our stories just to let them know that our story might not be exactly the same, but you do not struggle alone. We all go through things, but we try to help you to learn how to navigate through those things. And my goal is just to have somebody hear a story like your story, Tater, which I don't even know your story and I can't wait to hear it.
What are you
But
going to learn today?
I cannot wait. And then hear that story and maybe just get out of bed that day or off their couch and open the door and say, if Tammy did it, I can do it. If Tater did it, I can do it. And just know that there's hope out there. And that's exactly what my mission and vision has been. And it's been such an honor and pleasure to meet people like you, just to have you share your story, and who knows who we can help with it. So I guess let's just start where it began, Tater. Where you want to start.
So I have a question. When I looked up your podcast, I didn't listen to any of it because I didn't want any preconceived, and everybody's story is going to be different. So it doesn't matter that if I heard one person's story, it's going to be like that. But it's
Right.
H.O.P.E, right? The letters mean something, correct?
Helping other people evolve.
Okay. Okay. I think that I saw that, but I just wanted to and ask because it slipped my mind. So,
Yes, yes.
well, I guess the story is, I guess we can, you know, hop around because my brain's is scatterbrain like that, but I'll just try to start from the beginning because you know how it is. We
Yeah,
try, but
we try. I get it.
we get off the roadmap real quick, you know what I'm
Real
saying?
quick.
But so I'm 40 years old, and I kind of briefly touched on where I'm from and stuff. And so I grew up in Illinois. My parents were split up, and my dad is from Boston, Dorchester, which is a Southie, as they say. And he's no longer with us, but he's 100% Irish, bloodline. And so they drank, the whole family. And so my mom, I wouldn't say really drank a whole lot. It was one of those occasional type things. And my mom's no longer with us as well. I'll just go ahead and say that so we can kind of touch on that later. But my dad and mom, I don't remember them ever really loving each other. Like I remember one Christmas, I got this skateboard, maybe a bike or whatever it was. And that's the only Christmas I remember them ever being together. When we lived in Granite City, Illinois, right outside St. Louis, I was 6 years old and on. And that's when you really start, developing as a person and learning, and remembering back. But that's the only memory I have of my parents loving each other. I can always remember them hating each other. And so that kind of still bothers me till today. Even though I'm older, it's just like, why couldn't they love each other? And and a lot of kids do blame themselves on why the parents couldn't stay together. And I don't think I ever did that. I kind of just was like, why couldn't they get along? You know, and a lot of people do get together, they have children young, and then they grow apart.
Mhm.
And it's the same thing with people in general, like relationships or just friendships or anybody. You kind of just, chapters, that was there. They're only there for that chapter in your life. But then if you do have a child, you're going to be connected throughout the entirety of the kid's life and your life because, you have something going on. Even if you are split and one person does keep custody, you're always going to be attached unless you just flat out want to leave and not be a part of the child's life, which I've heard. So my dad was part of my life. He went on to Fort Knox, Kentucky, was stationed there for the rest of his career, and then he got a new family. He met a new woman and two kids. So they're half sister, half brother, and then I have a half brother from my mom's side that's older than me,
Okay.
and he and my dad apparently hated each other
Oh,
because that wasn't his blood child. I was, so I think my half brother felt a little bit of jealousy because he was kind of being neglected as the outside child, and and I'm just innocent kid
right.
was the one that was being loved by both parents because both parents, that was
Mm,
their kid. And I totally understand that. So he and my dad didn't you get along, and my half brother, and I don't know him that well. He's alive. I still don't. We never really talked much.
okay.
So he moved out before I really can remember. He was with us in Georgia and in Germany and stuff like that. But then it was kind of soon after that when we moved to Illinois that they kind of went their separate ways uh, as a family. So it's interesting, it's like your dad's kind of gone and out of the picture and comes to town every 2 weeks, and visits. And whenever he's in town, he's not on leave. He went to Korea a couple times, so he was gone for some periods of time. And my mom tried.
Mhm.
She worked at a hospital, a unit secretary, is what she did professional. And, she wanted to try to go to do different things, but it was interesting. I just saw her go to work and take care of me, and she did the best she could. Didn't really have much of a family besides that. Like her side of the family, she would always kind of talk about how, and I'll say this word because she said it, but she always said that her side of the family was crazy.
Okay.
Her brother was in Vietnam and he wasn't right after that. And she would always just say she had a sister. And I briefly met her when I was very, very young. And her mom, I briefly met her before she passed away. And then on my dad's side of the family, grandparents wise, his father passed away when he was very young. He was in the military, just like my father. And his mom, I met Nana Kavanaugh, is her what we call her, and I met her quite a few times going to Boston and visiting. So she was the grandma that I remember and know, and she passed away a while back, and so it's been just very interesting. It's like, as I'm talking, I'm not dogging on anyone. I'm just saying this is what I view life from where I was, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. You're not trying to bash anybody, you're
Right.
just kind of giving it straight, and so. Um, yeah, I didn't really. I was thinking about this, and I was posting a few videos that she saw on my TikTok, and one was like, I don't think my parents encouraged me enough. Like my dad was in the military, so he encouraged me to join the military, the branch that he said, quote, was the easier one, which was the Air Force, because he was in the Army, which is they're more grunts and they're more like, the Marines are pretty tough. I have a couple of friends that joined the Marines, and the Navy is right around there. And he just said, join the Air Force. And I go, I don't want to join any military. I hate being told what to do.
Okay.
And I have friends that joined, and obviously my dad served for 20 some odd years. He was an E8, which is a master sergeant. Like he was in it for a very long time. And I respect anybody and everybody. I have friends that joined, and I love that they did that. I just don't like being told what to do. Like if I'm at a job, I want to work my ass off. I'm gonna do my job, but I just really don't like being the way that they do it. And I get it. They're breaking down people and want to like mold them into what they need them to do and not have anybody trying to be Rambo, go off and save the day because it's dangerous. And I totally understand it. So,
Right.
um, but I didn't really feel like I had, I had a regular childhood, that you can think of. We grew up in a cul-de-sac and neighbors, and we played, hockey out in the street and I ride my bike, and I had friends. Went to school. I didn't play any sports besides, soccer back in the day, and then like some baseball I tried, but I really didn't get into sports. I love video games. I love music videos. Music's always been a very important part of my life, and I'll touch on that why I'm doing what I'm doing now in life. And I love music. It's my oldest friend, and I just would always listen to music going to the school bus stop down the street. I remember having like a cassette player that had the digital interface on the front. I thought it was cool on the school bus. And then a CD player came along and it don't skip. And then it does when you hit a big old bump on your bike. And I just loved all this music. And I had friends growing up and got into high school. And it was one of those, I wasn't like part of any certain clique or group or anything like that. I kind of floated around with everybody. And I feel like I'm a funny person. I've always kind of been really funny. And my dad was definitely funny. Smart ass at that, but very funny. And my mom was funny too. I ain't gonna lie, man. My mom was funny. But things really altered in my life when I was in eighth grade. My parents, like I said, had been split up. My mom was dating a guy that she knew from work. And when people date or they get with somebody that has like an addiction problem, they seem to not like get away from that sometimes. That they're almost, I wouldn't say attracted to it, but it's something that it's a reoccurring theme in a lot of people's life. And so this guy was a heavy drinker, and apparently when he drank, he liked to get violent, which is the worst, physically and emotionally. Obviously, happens a lot, but physically he would get violent. I remember waking up in eighth grade to my mom screaming because he was beating on her, and I started screaming, like, what? Stop doing that. I'm in my room. And he's like, if you don't shut up, I'm going to keep on beating her. And then I'm going to come there and beat you. And so I'm hearing that as a kid in middle school. And the saddest thing is I couldn't go in there and stop because I mean, he's a large guy, very physical fit, obviously been drinking. And, when you're doing that, you're not thinking in your right mind. So I just was screaming at my mom. And then apparently they stopped and like he went out in the living room and she invited me in the room and was talking to me and and then he was talking to me afterwards and she was like, don't go around him, don't be around him. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, well, he's in there talking to me like, hey, we're just having an argument, I'm sorry, and blah, blah. You know how it is.
Sure.
Manipulating is what he was doing. Now that I'm older and I realize, he was just manipulative. And so that happened and that was one incident. And then I'm just going to be honest about everything because that's who I am. So I
Yeah.
apparently my dad had me for visitation in Kentucky, and I was there with him and his wife. And I can't remember if they had kids yet or not. I can't remember that exactly this time frame, but it was near that time of that incident happening. Well, I was supposed to go home, and I didn't. I stayed one more day, and I wake up to news about my mom in the hospital
Oh, no.
because of the guy.
Oh,
Well, apparently they split up and it was her birthday. And the plan was for her to go out with people from work. Well, what happened is he broke into the house, our house. I don't know if he was living there or not. I can't remember the terms on that, but it was our house. It wasn't his. His name was not on anything. And he broke into the back window and broke all the phones. So she couldn't call police. And there was on our front door, if you open it, it would swing open to a closet immediately behind it.
okay.
And he was in there cutting up all her clothes with a large kitchen knife so she couldn't go out and wear anything. And when she opened up the door to go get ready, he was behind the door and slammed it, hit her over the head, and knocked her unconscious. Is what she's recalling from the whole fact, and then beat her and stabbed her with the knife. It wasn't bad, I don't think. I think it was in the leg. Was beating her and planned on, from what the courts would say, is he planned on killing her and me because he thought I was going to be there too.
Ew.
So it's premeditated because he broke the phones.
Okay.
And so luckily I wasn't there.
Right.
Um, and so she ended up doing something and getting out the front door. And luckily the neighbors that were down the road, because it was at night, they saw her like bleeding and limping down the road and screaming. And so he, at that point, knew that he was probably going to be in trouble. So he grabbed the knife, hopped in her car, I believe. And then it's just a long time ago. It was in 98. So it's been a very long time. And I try not to think too much about it. But,
Of course.
I think he drove away in the car, I think, and then threw the knife out so they couldn't find it. And so they eventually arrested him and he got in trouble. And I really can't remember the terms on like what he actually got it was just, I remember hearing premeditated, which is a word that I never heard before that in my entire life until that moment. And my dad, they told me they broke the news and we had to go back and I saw my mom in the hospital and I couldn't even recognize her. Her face was just so puffy and messed up and uh they had to fix her face. So they
Oh,
had to cut her scalp and pull it down over her face and reconstruct her face
mm,
to for her to even be remotely a person again.
mm,
And obviously that was a long time recovery. And I've just remember from that moment on, I was just thinking about this the other day. I remember from that moment on, I lost my mom that day because she was never, I mean, she was, you could say this about people, oh, they're this and that, but I mean, I do not remember my mom being the same person after that, and nor would anybody, because ever since then, I always thought that she would need to go get counseling, and probably all of us, and it's just like, she wouldn't do it, and she was very skittish about like I would walk in and she would jump and grab for something because she, it's PTSD and she just is scared and she always thought somebody was kind of following us and we moved a lot after that and it was sad, very sad. And I think about that from time to time because yeah, I just thought about this the other day. Like that's the point that I felt like I lost my mom and I didn't have a relationship with her anymore because I don't even know what was going on with her half the time. And I would try and beg her to go see somebody. I'm like, you really need to go see somebody. And like I had to move out and it wasn't right after that. It was after high school that I moved out. So I lived with her throughout high school and
quick question about that. Do you think with your mom with that, because I had that same, my mom didn't have that same thing happen, but my mom, she had had open heart surgery when she was like 57 and she was always happy and all of this. And the day that she was going to the hospital to get like her heart rehab because she was able to drive again, she got T-boned by somebody going 75 miles an hour and it broke her wrist, her ankle. She had back damage, broken back, and she also got brain damage from it. And it was kind of the same thing that you're saying. She was never the same after that. And it was the same thing. Like I'd be like, Mom, you really need to go get some counseling, which my father was very abusive. So she went through all that her whole life too. And so when I think about that, she wouldn't do it. She was always like, no, I don't need it. No, I don't need it. And I lost my mom too, like that, feeling that way. But in my mom's head, she thought counseling meant she was crazy.
yeah.
And so I feel like a lot of people feel that way. Like if you're going to see somebody to get help, not so much anymore because nowadays people are being more open to it. But I
Mhm.
think with my mom's age, I mean, I'm not sure what your mom's age was, but that was the thought process. Like we're crazy if we ask someone to help us, or we don't want to tell someone else our problem because they're going to judge us. And I
You
wonder if
know,
that's
thinking about that, how you say that, I probably would relate to the whole my mom thinking that she's not crazy because everybody else in the family was. Like
right.
everybody and I remember people, I don't want to name names, but like people would say like everybody else is crazy but her is
Mm,
how mimic, she would be, people would mimic her and say, "Oh, everybody else is crazy but me." And so that's probably I never really thought about that too much. And that's sad to hear about your mother. I mean, it's a terrible thing to happen. And
right.
I would imagine that she probably felt that way. And maybe she did say that. I didn't really understand what that meant because I moved out in my early 20s into my friend's house, and at that point it was drinking in high school. My dad was like, "Don't ever take that first sip," and because as I would call my father an alcoholic, he was because he drank all the time. He was in the military and got kicked out of explosive department because of being a drinker. And I would imagine the military is, I don't know if they look the other way, but they probably deal with a lot of stuff.
Sure. Sure.
And so they did whatever they could. And so, I mean, he was not going to hide that he was a drinker. I mean, he would try. It was the Bacardi in the trunk, pouring it in his Pepsi, and like I didn't know. And it was just, so I started drinking. It's a lot of kids do it, and
Sure.
nowadays, I don't think the youth is really drinking as much as maybe like older generations.
Mhm.
Maybe it is marijuana since that is a little bit more legal everywhere. It's not single place, but a lot of places, a lot of states, it's legal, and so that may be a factor on why they're not drinking as much. But I'm pretty sure that the alcohol consumption on a regular basis. Maybe like weekend to weekend is not as much as it was maybe when I was young. So, but it was for us like teenagers were drinking and partying, and then all of a sudden you graduate and you're partying still, and I'm in my 20s and my friend has a house and we're going over and having kegs because one of our friends works at the liquor store and he can get kegs for cheap and this and that. And we're just partying. So when I was young, I wanted to be a music video director.
Okay.
Full Sail is a college that I thought I was going to go to, but then MTV stopped playing music videos on the
Right.
main channel and went to secondary channel, and they started doing like what we now know as reality TV. And I'm just like, oh well, what is this nonsense? Like, so I didn't know. I mean, coincidentally, music videos are still a thing now because of consumption. It flows into that, and I'll get into that later. But I kind of gave up on that dream, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't want to join the Air Force like my dad said, and I didn't really have my parents like point me in any direction. Like they were just like, go to community college. So I did. And
Mm.
all we did was party and go to community college. And I'm like, this is not it. Like, this isn't it at all. So I mean, I worked at Blockbuster in high school, worked at Pizza Hut for one of my first jobs. I bagged groceries at the commissary, which was when the base was operational for my father in the army, and my mom worked there. And so I mean, I was always a hard worker like my father was. But I just didn't have any direction. Like
Mm.
self drive is the thing that I pointed out in my entire life that I've always had a problem with. I've always
Okay.
excelled at everything I've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that self drive of like, yeah, oh, I should go chase down this stream or do this and that. And so I just worked at Blockbuster. Then I worked at a Flying J truck stop for 6.5 years. And I just hung out and partied. I worked, if we're working 3 to 11, getting off at 11, coming over to 11:30, who needs some drinks? I'm going to go buy them. And just partied and partied and partied and, kind of just didn't really have any drive. Like my friends, some joined the military and started doing things, and other ones were working. And I wouldn't say that I had any kind of goal that I set for myself.
Okay.
So 6.5 years at a truck stop, I'm not living with my mom anymore. She's alone. She's moving from place to place, and I can't really keep tabs on her. And she would call, and I regret it now. I would just kind of just set the phone down and let her blab and wouldn't even hear. Like my friends would laugh like one time, and I really regret this. And dude, I'm honest about everything. Like we were going to eat Taco Bell, and I'm like, Mom, I'm about to order Taco Bell. Like everybody else's order, I need to go order. She just kept talking. So I sat the phone down and kind of went and ordered, came back and had my soda and filled it up, and she's still talking. We kind of joked about it, man. But my mom was always cool with my friends. Like she liked them, and um, so, and none of them really knew my dad because he didn't live there, and they knew who he was. But
Okay.
my dad tried. I believe, I kind of feel like he had a new family with the two
Mhm.
kids that lived there and the wife, and that
Right.
sucked. I visited, and I tried, but it's just not like I never felt like I had a home
Mm-hmm.
with like loving parents, and I saw people that had that. And everybody's got their issues, everybody's got their problems. There ain't nobody perfect, and I totally understand that. But I just was like, I wanted that,
Right.
but I can't do anything about that. And I just live my life, and so I kind of just was floating around, working. And then my friend got a job at Safe Light Auto Glass, so I joined Safe Light Repair, Safe Light Replace.
I'm getting ready to do that actually.
And that was right when I learned, right when I joined this, and when they made that jingle. But I joined and I worked there for 3.5 years. But I'm just partying and living through life. And this was about 2012. I had right around that time frame. I really liked rap music and rock music growing up. Did not listen to country music at all. I thought it was corny. Oh, my dog died, truck broke down, and I get it now. Like it's funny looking back on it. It's very, and you'll find out why. But it's like it's ironic that I used to make fun of it, because you make fun of what you don't know. If you're ignorant to a thing, you just make fun of it until you do like kind of get down with it. And you're like, oh, this ain't that bad. Like you
Right.
take food or movie or TV show or something, like this ain't that bad. But
Uh-huh.
I never listened to country music. I'm not sure if you're a fan or not, but it was funny. Like my friend heard it on a radio station for this school for radio in St. Louis, and he was just like, hey, I'm gonna go try out. And I was like, all right, his name is Kyle James, and Kyle James. We would always kind of mock the way he talked. He doesn't talk like that, but you know how you give your friends crap. And he went and joined it, and he was just like, "Hey man, I got in that school for radio." I go, "They let you in? They're gonna love me." And I was kind of giving him crap, but I was like, "Cool, man, you join." I'm like, "Hey, I'm gonna go try out." So, I was working to Stay Flat Auto Glass. I felt like I had nothing going on, and I'm like, he's like, "Dude, you love music. You can talk. You have no problem. You've always kind of been this walk up and talk to anybody type person, man." I'm like, "You love music. Why don't you try?" So I did, and they let me in the school, and it's a 1 year program at that point, and traditional style program, and it's kind of like one of those trade schools. You're not going to a 4 year university, and like I went to community college but dropped out, and I'm like, you know what, I'll give it a shot. And so at that point, I felt like I joined something that I kind of gave me a purpose.
Right.
And for a very long time, I graduated in '03, so from '03 to 2012, I just felt lost,
Right.
and played video games, hung out, drank. That's all I really did, and just kind of went on vacation here and there. But um 2012, went to school for a year, and then 6 months after I graduated, got my certificate, I got a job in Northern Illinois, at a job. I didn't get it right off the bat, but 6 months later, they needed somebody, and they hollered at me. And so I moved to Northern Illinois, and I was dating somebody at the time, and she moved with me, and it was kind of her time because I lived with my friends, and then I moved in with her and her parents to like save some money while I was going to school. Because I mean, normally you're not going to get a job at, like, it was in St. Louis. Like, that's a big market. It's like
Right.
market 23. Like, they have New York, LA, Chicago, and it goes down the market size from there. And it was 23, which is pretty big. And I was like, chances are I'm not going to get a job here, probably going to have to move. And so she moved away from her parents, which was a brave thing because she only lived with her parents ever. And she
Right.
was younger than me, and she was friends with people I knew. And we worked at worked at Flying J Truck Stop. And she moved with me, and we moved to Northern Illinois, and I worked there for 3.5 years. Like, I worked my way up from being, like I've always said, I'm a very hard worker, and I worked my way up from being like this new person to being the right hand man of the owner of the radio station. He and his brother owned it, the Stud Stills up in Northern Illinois. And circling back to not liking country, I started listening to country in 2012 because of, when you go to a small radio station, you're usually on all the stations. And so
Okay.
you're on classic hits, you're playing like the Bee Gees, you're playing Beatles and the Doors and all that. And then you go to a rock station and you're playing whatever's hot on there, AC/DC, and then you go to a country station and you're playing what's on there. And so I knew everything else besides country music. I knew pop music, I knew all that. So I started listening to country. I went to school for radio. And 2012 was an interesting year for country music. If anybody's a fan that listening, is Florida Georgia Line came out, and they were just like on fire. I remember going to Zach Brown Band and seeing them before I ever got into all of it. I went on a float trip one time in Missouri, and it was the Boondocks song. No, Pontoon. Pontoon came out by Little Big Town, and that was just everywhere. It was like brand new, and everybody on the dang river was playing. I heard it like 3,000 times, and I'm like, man, what is this? They're like, Little Big Town. I'm like, man, I never heard of that. And they're like, it's country. I'm like, that's not country. Because in my mind, it was like Alan Jackson, George Strait, Tracy Lawrence. Like, I heard that country.
Right.
And I was like, that ain't country, man, whatever. But then I went to school and started listening more to the radio stations in St. Louis. There's a couple country stations. And I'm like, you know what, man? I'm like, this ain't bad. 5150 by Dirks Bentley. And I'm like, I'm like, this ain't country. What is this? Eric Church. Like, you listen to him and you're like, that's country? And so it was kind of, I hear a lot of people say that. And so it's like, oh, that's country. Okay. But I still loved, rap music and country. I mean, rock music and all that. And so I was learning more by being on the classic hit station on older, music. I really got into the Doors when I was listening to that. A buddy of mine, a manager actually at Flying J Truck Stop, turned me on to the Doors, and we liked all the kinds of music besides country. I don't think I ran anybody really that listened to country. I had some friends that would sometimes. I'm like, turn that off. But then I started
Right.
listening. I'm like,
You're
man,
hurting
this
my
is
ears.
yeah. It's like, that's kind of cool. But yeah, I was working at the radio station, working my way up, and coincidentally, so this ties into the Tater thing. So I went by Joe, and then JoJo at Flying J, because we had another Joe and we needed to differentiate the two. And then I would joke and be like, I'm JoJo the Sugar Hoe. It'd be like a goofy name that we had or whatever. And obviously, I'm not going to go for that. Like, they asked me what nicknames I had, and I said, well, it's Joe or JoJo. And they're like, we already have a Sloppy Joe. You can't be Joe. And I'm like, what? They're like, his name's Brian. And I'm like, well, why is he Sloppy Joe? Then they're like, it's a nickname. And I'm like, okay, then what do I need? And they were like, well, come up with something. I said, well, JoJo the Sugar Ho. They said, that is not going to work. Like, you're not doing that. And I had no idea. My middle name's Ryan. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, um, and so they say on Friday when you full time start, you got to have a name. And so all week I'm racking my brain. I'm like, I have no idea. I just moved here. I don't have a name. I don't know what the hell. What do you want me to say? And so I walked in. They're like, well, what are you going to name yourself? I said, I don't know, because you're going to brand yourself that the entire time on station. I said, I don't have a name. They said, well, what do you like? And I was like, Philly cheesesteaks, bologna sandwiches, which I haven't eaten bologna in like years. But and I was like, I cannot have a sandwich without potato chips. Like, a sandwich is mandatory with potato chips next to it. Like, I have to have that. And they're like, aha, we got it. They went into the office and they came back laughing, and they had one of those "Hello, my name is" stickers, and they wrote Tater on it, and they peeled it off and they slapped it on my chest. And they're like, we always wanted a Tater, and you're going to be on the country station. And I'm like, really? Because I don't like country, but I didn't say that.
Right,
I said,
right.
hey, I'm glad to work here. I'm glad I got a job full time. So I really started diving into country music, and that was again the time frame. Like, Sam Hunt came out at that time frame. 2013 is when I got hired, and it was different than what I knew. Like, I knew Brad Paisley, I knew who Tim McGraw was because he did a song with Nelly, and right outside of St. Louis where I grew up. So Nelly and the St. Lunatics and all that, if you know him, and the group, they're huge in rap, and I mean he's still a name right now, and so I grew up on all that, and I was like, "Oh, this is kind of cool." And then I remember, like, Florida Georgia Line did a remix with Nelly, and it was on our pop station. And I don't think we really played it on the country station, but it was on pop station. I'm like, "Oh, this is cool." So I really dove into like what was country and what was really hot and what was going on, and trying to do my research as much as I can. And then I started finding out who is writing the songs and the story behind them, and the songs, and who's writing what, and seeing names always pop up and this and that. And I remember back in the day when I was a kid, I would always see like who was writing stuff, but you always kind of think like all the rappers were writing their stuff, all the rock stars were writing their stuff. You didn't know there was actually a thing called a songwriter.
Right, right.
You always heard of Nashville being country music, and then like, different areas. Atlanta was huge for hip hop, and New York and LA and all that. California, I should just say in general. And so I just started loving music, playing it every day. And I was kind of focused on that. And I would drink a little bit. I was with somebody, so I didn't get too wild. But drinking was still heavily thought of. It wasn't like I need to wake up and have a drink. It was more like, it's after work, let's go out and have a couple drinks. I wouldn't say the person I was with at the time was a heavy drinker at all. It was somewhat here and there. So I don't think the drinking from when we were together in '09 to um 2018, it wasn't bad.
Okay.
It was back when I was hanging out with my friends. There was a
Uh-huh.
lot of binge drinking, a lot of heavy drinking then, but when we moved away, I was still drinking, but not as much in the party mode.
Right.
It was people that I worked with, they would have drinks, we would go out, and so it was probably maybe here and there, weekends, here and there, hanging out. The girl I was with ended up getting a job at Sapp Brothers in Kansas City, which Sapp Brothers is a truck stop based out of Omaha, and they were building one in Kansas City, and she ended up getting a job there. You know, double the salary, they'll pay us to move. And I was worried because I'm like, I went to school for this. It was quite a bit of money for 1 year of school. And I'm like, I went to school for radio. I thought this is my career. Like, what's going on? And I'm going to uproot this. And, it's not like I'm not going, you're going to have to go by yourself. It was like, well, how can this work? And so I remember getting a hold of and I remember one station in Kansas City that was country music. They were always kind of like the leader of playing new stuff. And I always liked playing new stuff because I liked all the new stuff, but my station that I was working at, they didn't really primarily like to play the brand new stuff. They would wait till it got to a certain point on the chart and play it. And in my mind, I'm like, these people I did the request hour. Tater
Right.
time, baby. I was doing tater time. They
Right.
requesting during tater time. And I'm like, they're wanting to hear this brand new Luke Combs guy. And they're like, well, we ain't playing it yet. And I was like, dude, I'm telling you, everybody keeps requesting like 5 or 6 times during the request hour to hear Hurricane by Luke Combs. Man, I think we should play it. Nah, I don't think so. And then we finally did. But that was 2016. And then 2017, at the end of that year, is when she wanted to make the move. And so I started to applying for country stations in Kansas City because that's what I was doing was country. I was heavily involved. Like, I would hop around, like I said, in a small station, small cluster of stations. You go from everyone to everyone. So at that point, my parents are still living. You know, my dad is doing his family thing and still in the army and retiring and working at a post office and a bus driver and obviously still drinking. And my mom is moving from place to place. I don't know what's going on with her. I would keep in touch with her, but then I'm 3.5 hours away. Like I couldn't really see her anymore. And so we would contact each other. But then I'm like, hey, I'm moving to Kansas City. She got the job. I eventually got a part-time job at the country station that plays new country in Kansas City. Luckily, I was like, hey, I'll just do anything to keep my foot in the door. And I went
Right.
from having a full-time position where I was really heavily relied on in Northern Illinois to going to 4 hours a week,
Ooh,
8 to midnight on Sunday nights when I know not a soul is probably listening. So that, but you got to do what you got to do. You know, I'm like, hey, if you're not hiring full time, what about if you all got part time? You know, I'll just keep my foot in the door and see if I can work my way up or whatever. And so eventually I did that. And then, I let my mom and dad know that I was moving there. And, um, still wasn't that close though. It was 3.5 hours away from St. Louis area where my mom was. So I didn't get to see her much, but uh, we moved. And then a year of being there, me and her split. We went our separate ways and, still friendly and talk to each other and this and that, but it just wasn't, we kind of, like I was saying earlier, grew apart. I wasn't the same person and she definitely wasn't the same person because we were young. She was younger than I was and just like not a dig on her or bad or anything like that. It just didn't happen like that for us. And so that was the point where it was 2018 and I was working my way up the ladder at the radio station, doing more there, doing all the broadcasts that I could, and just trying to get more airtime, show that I'm worthy enough to be on the air. Because I really worked my butt off to being first on the radio. You're like they train you, but then once you're doing the station, you get reps in and you get better, and you can tell you're getting better and just working at it. And me and her went our separate ways, and then I was now single for the
okay.
first time in a long time, and it took me about a year to kind of just give that a break. I wasn't trying to date anyone. I wasn't trying to see anybody because that kind of caught me off guard of what happened. But I was drinking more and I was working though. Like I wouldn't let alcohol affect me at work, but it was like, if we're out at an event, I'm having drinks, we kind of, that's in the industry and it's prevalent. And it's still to this day that in the industry of music, alcohol plays a huge factor in everything.
Sure.
Artists come to town, you go out for drinks, they have free drinks backstage. And you go to the concert and we're doing these things where alcohol is being kind of like the sponsor and all these things, and you're kind of like it's surrounding you. And so I was just like dealing with the pain of that. But let me rewind. Right before me and her went our separate ways, my mom passed away.
Oh,
She would always tell me she wasn't feeling good when I did talk to her on the phone. I was like, you need to go to the doctor. You need to see someone. She's like, ah, yeah. I'm like, you work at a hospital. Like, you understand. Like, are you still working there? What's going on with your job? What's up? Are you able to keep what's going on with you while I'm moving around? Like, she just didn't have any place. The childhood home that I grew up in, that was no longer around. We just moved from place to place and rent here, rent there. And then when I moved out, she was by herself, which it sucked. But I just, I was in my early 20s and it's like, I can't live with you forever. And she was just hopping from place to place and trying to keep tabs on what she's doing. And I would talk to her sometimes, not answer her call sometimes, not answer my dad's call. Like I didn't talk to him for a couple of years, I think. Not even once, because I was just so mad about. There was one incident that really affected me, and he uh, he came to pick me up, and he was drunk,
mm,
and it was time to drive to Kentucky, and he picked me up, and he was intoxicated, like very intoxicated, and swerving all over the place, and I'm just like, pull over, dude. What are you doing? And you know, I was young. I was able to drive, but I was young and he had to get in the passenger seat and pass out. And I drove, and I can't remember this before GPSs and stuff. And I remember like following the way or, I made the trip a couple times. So I kind of knew where I was going, but, finally came to and I'm like just pissed off at him.
right.
And
Right.
I hated that I felt like he chose alcohol over me.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like, oh, alcohol, you going to get drunk at a bar is way more important than picking me up, your son, to
Mm.
take all the way back to Kentucky to go visit with you. And so it aggravated me. And, you know, that happened, but it's like, thinking back, I lost my mom. I remember I was supposed to go work something the next day. It was around Halloween in 2017. And I was supposed to wake up early. Halloween, we're going to do this thing called Boo at the Zoo, and it's like for the kids and at the zoo. And I keep getting this phone number ringing me at like 2 a.m.
Um,
It was after a concert. I had the vehicle because I was going to go the next day and go do this thing, and I'm trying to sleep because I got to get up and go hang out like a long time for this event. And this area code from where I grew up keeps calling me, and I'm like, "Who is this?" I thought it was somebody pranking me. I'm like, "What the heck?" Like Halloween prank? I don't even know what it was. And I'm like, they keep calling me, and I wouldn't answer, and I wouldn't answer, and I just pick up, and I'm like, hang up, pick up, and hang up, and they kept calling me, and I'm like, pick it up, I'm like, "Hello," and they say my name. Is that you? Is this you? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, is your mother Linda? And I'm
mm.
just like, yeah. And they're like, well, this is the coroner's office. And I don't know if I remember what she said after that. Like, I was just like, you're not getting a call from the coroner. Just say, what's up? You're getting a call because something tragic happened. And she just ended up passing away because she was sick, and she had a lot of bacteria, and it was just, it was, infections, and it was terrible. And so I had to go back and deal with my half brother on how to take care of that because it was our mother. And we ended up getting her cremated, and she's here with me still. And I really do. For anybody that's listening and they have a loved one that they haven't talked to in a while, call them. I remember doing a
Mhm.
TikTok about this. I'm like, if you're thinking about calling somebody, call them.
Mhm. I want to interrupt right there with that because I talk about that a lot, and especially if somebody comes across your mind, either text them or call them right then because there's a reason why they just came across your mind. Maybe they just needed you to say, "Hey, how you doing?" Because maybe they just needed that at that moment. But yeah, I just unfortunately February 3rd lost my sister back home in Michigan, and it was sudden. We just found out the autopsy results yesterday that it was COPD, pneumonia, and diabetes, which I didn't know she had diabetes. And I don't think she did either, but it was kind of what you're saying. She actually called me on that Saturday, and she was, I don't even know, my sister. So my sister is a practicing alcoholic, and if she would eat any type of like cookies or brownies that had marijuana in them, she would hallucinate. And she like it would be, I'd be like, why do you even eat those? So when she called me on that Saturday, she was talking to me about what we call seagulls down here in Texas. I'm like, seagulls. And she's like, no, you guys call them something different. We were just on the phone talking about this. And I'm like, oh, Wendy. And so I think that she's high. So we end up hanging up the phone. And I did call her back that night because I thought that she had been eating some brownies or cookies that had marijuana. So then on Sunday, I was trying to get hold of her. I couldn't. I called her son, and he said, yeah, she's not feeling well. She's going to the doctor's in the morning. I said, okay, just wanted to make sure that she was okay. Well, then she ended up passing away that next morning. And so I have that, like what you're saying, like I have that I didn't call her again, just even just to say I love you. So I agree with you. Like if you haven't talked to someone in a long time or you have something going on, try to make amends because when they're gone, there's nothing you can do then, you know, and then we live with
Ex-
that. But
Yeah,
I do believe that they're still with us, and they're not with us in the flesh. I believe that they're still around us. So yeah,
yeah, it is true. Like, if you are thinking about somebody, give them a holler. Just say, hey, I'm checking in on you. Hope you're
yeah,
good. I mean,
yep,
it doesn't have to be a long, drawn out conversation unless you want it to be. And
right,
that's maybe that calls for its moments. But if somebody's like, or just send them a text, hey, I'm checking in on you, a little voice memo or something like that, that they can hear your voice and go back
yes,
and forth. And so, yeah, my mom, she ended up passing away. And then not too long after that, we went our separate ways in the relationship. And then, dealing with that and, working my way up at the radio station and doing whatever I can to keep my mind off of stuff sometimes. And then, the drinking was becoming a thing. I'd go out to the bars and hang out. And then, you know, after that, it's like just work, 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 work. And I was just trying to work my way up and do as much as I can because I cared about work. And it was a lot of my life. But then I was drinking outside of work and I was just kind of doing work and drink, and play video games and just loving music, obviously, and still doing all that. And so, uh, from 2018 to, COVID was an interesting time. I felt isolated and alone, and so did everybody else, and that didn't help. I was just like, I don't know what to do, and just keep working and drinking. And it's just like started getting more of like drinking here and there at the bars to now every night.
Mhm.
And then during 2020, my father came to visit me, and he said he was going to come visit, but he didn't tell me exactly when. And I remember playing Xbox, and I remember I had this weird, eerie feeling. And I looked back out of my window and I see him walking up the sidewalk. And I'm like, what are you doing? And I open the door. I go, what are you doing? He goes, I told you I was going to come visit. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't tell me when. He's like, oh, I was going to St. Louis to see some friends. And, I decided to come on over here. And I'm like, all right, well, you know, uh, it wasn't a good situation. He was drinking a lot, not eating. He misplaced his false teeth and misplaced his phone and all this. And he was just like, he was in bad shape, and did some damage to the place I was living in. And I was just like, ruined my Xbox and just did some things. And I was like, you got to go, man. I'm like, you're in here destroying my stuff. You're not eating. And I was like, we got to go get something to eat. So, cause my half sister, was gonna fly in. We had to go pick her up. And I'm like, they're going to drive him back in the truck so he wouldn't stop and go get drunk anywhere because we were worried about him. And we went to go get Taco Bell because he liked Taco Bell. So do I, just not as much now. But then I was just like,
Right.
yeah, let's go get some Taco Bell. So we went to get tacos, and I dumped all his alcohol out because he was, he definitely was terrorizing my place because he was drunk and didn't know what he was doing. And like he uh he was eating tacos and the cheese was flying out of the taco. He was shaking so much.
Mhm.
And I know he knew he kind of messed up, and he was just like, I'm sorry. And I just kind of was looking at him like, who are you? Like, what is this? What happened? And I vividly remember like one time my dad in the hotel he got whenever we were like visiting one time, and we stayed in the St. Louis area, and he had this Bible in his hand, and he was talking about being sober and learning the word of the church. And I didn't grow up in a church at all. We didn't do that. That was nothing. We did it all. I never went. I didn't judge anybody that went it. I just didn't do it.
Mhm.
Didn't have much faith at all. I just vividly remember seeing him do that, and him kind of just like tearing up and saying, yeah, I know you're drinking, and I know you're partying, and I don't want you to go down the same path that I had to. And at that point, when you hear people that are dealing with substance abuse, they sometimes just say things just to make you, they just say whatever they think that you want to hear.
Mhm. For sure.
And I didn't know if that was that or was the truth.
Mhm.
And I'll touch base on that later. Um, but in 2020, he came to visit, and that was the last time I ever saw him alive.
Mhm.
And it was a very bad situation. But then later, his birthday came up, and I called him. In November is his birthday, and I called him on his birthday. And he was like, "Oh, I didn't think I was going to hear from you." I'm like, "Well, you're my dad. I love you. Like, what's going on?" Because we didn't talk for some years. That was a while back, but we
Right.
talked, and we visited and would hang out. And when he did come to town before that last time, we would go out and drink. And it's probably not the best thing to do, but it's like, I don't know what else to do with my dad. Like, we would talk football. We love football, and we would talk and just, so I did drink with him. Wasn't like a lot, but it was just like one of those things that I'm old enough to now. And it's just like, I don't know if he's ever going to stop, but it was just like, in hindsight now, that I didn't know that it was gaining steam with me. Like, I'm never going to be that. We always think that I'm never going to be that. I'm not going to be as bad as blah, blah, blah. That isn't at least I'm not doing that. And
Huh?
a lot of people can relate to that, to whatever it is: shopping, alcohol, drugs,
Right.
whatever it may be,
Yeah.
being a jerk or whatever. I'm never going to be like that person. So it was me thinking that I'll never be like my dad.
I have to stop there real quick just because so my dad passed away at 34 years old from alcoholism.
Mm,
He actually drowned in our bathtub. And I wrote a poem, like exactly what alcoholism will do. You know, your fate is either insanity, death, or prison. And I was never going to be that alcoholic either. Not
yeah,
me. Not
exactly.
me. And then there I was. Here I am. 21 years sober. But at that point, and so I can relate to what you're saying with that. So I'm sure other.
Exactly. It's just like you don't know.
Right. Right.
You don't know that it could be possible. And like, oh, I'm never going to be like that. So that's sad to hear that. 34 is a very young age,
So young. So young. I
right?
never really thought about how young it was. Yeah. So maybe who I am today. So we'll just, keep going with life.
It kind of blipped on there. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. The internet
Oh,
must have lagged out, but I'm here.
okay, good, good. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so now continue. So you called your dad on his birthday that year.
Yeah. And after I saw him not too long after that, it was his birthday. And I called him and we talked football and we were just, you know, checking in on each other. I'm like, how you doing? He's like, I'm trying, this and that. And it seemed like he was better. And then yeah, that was his birthday. And, hung up, I love you. I'll talk to you later. And the next day I got a call and he passed away. It lagged out again, didn't it? Hello?
We're back. I don't
Well, it
know what
seems like
happened.
it says that we're recording, so I guess we'll just pick up from there. And
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
like I was saying, so one day I called him, talked to him. I love you. He's, I'm surprised you called me. And I said, you're my father. I'm going to call you. And the next day I get a call that he's dead. He passed away a day after his birthday, which it's very ironic, to think about a life that you have a birthday one day and you're dead the next. And so it looks very odd on a tombstone, it's just like really, it's like, you have a birth date and a death date and they're not too far apart. I mean, the years are, but the days, it's like it's wild. So uh it I went to work that day at the radio station and I just in Kansas City, I ended up having my own radio show and or I was filling in at that time on the afternoon show and I kind of was just like, I'm just like you keep it real. I've always just tried to keep it real. And I was on the station and I'm like, I got some sad news today. I lost my father. He's no longer with us. And the amount of people that texted in and called and a love that poured in from people that I may have met or people I never met. They just kind of we know each other from texting in, or they just know me because of being on the radio. And so I would say, you know, my mom, the relationship, my dad in 2020, and then I had a cat named Breezy. Loved her more than anything in the world. I feel like as an animal, and
Uh-huh.
she ended up getting sick in 2021. So from after when my father passed away, you would think he passed away due to complications of alcohol and things of that nature, and you're like, oh well, maybe I should stop. Well, I didn't. It it turned into being heavier into drinking every day, a lot, you know and my cat Breezy, she was losing a lot of weight, and I really wasn't paying attention to my animals enough, and I took her to the vet, and I'm like, she's losing a lot of weight. She would always kind of throw up, it was like kind of always puking here and there, and it wasn't hairballs, it was more just like not being able to keep food down, I guess, and didn't really pay attention enough to that as I should have, but took her, and they were just like, yeah, there's something going on with her fatty liver disease or something like that. We need to put a feeding tube in and get her some stuff to kill that off. And I'm like, all right. So they gave her a feeding tube, and for a month I tried keeping her alive. And it just consumed me. It was to work at the radio station, to go home, to take care of her and try to get her to, I'm having to shake up this stuff and put it in a syringe and put it in her feeding tube. And I could tell it was very uncomfortable for her. And then she was puking it up. And so she couldn't keep this food down that she needed or this medicine that she needed. And it was just, hey, I don't know what's going on. So let's give her this anti-nausea pills. And so I'm having to wake up really early, get that in before I give her food to go to the radio station. I was working on the morning show. So I'm talking about like, I'm waking up at like 3 in the morning to do this and try to get her. And she's very, very frail looking because she lost all her weight and she couldn't keep food down. And it was terrible. And for a month I tried keeping her alive, but they eventually said it was cancer and it wasn't this fatty liver disease. And they felt a mass in her intestines because she was so skinny they could feel it. And they're like, that's cancer. We can't do anything about it. And I had to put her down. And I would have to say, like, adding up to that is the point where it kind of broke me, where I felt like everybody left me, you know? And
Yeah.
I already felt alone, but now I feel alone. Like
Right.
I'm not close to the relatives that I have. Cousins, not even that. I just felt like I didn't have a connection to my family really ever. And it's partly because of me. I'll call myself out that I can make like I was thinking, if you're thinking about somebody you could talk to them, it just is easy for me to talk to somebody as they are to talk to me. And I still have a problem with that. And I just felt like everybody left me. I felt alone. And I just after that, it was drinking heavily. I wrecked my car behind the wheel. That happened a couple times, and you're embarrassed, and at least I'm embarrassed, I should say. When things happen like that, and so I'm like making up some lie and telling the insurance that it was this and that. It's like that's behind me now. It's just like I don't know what to do. Like, well, things happened. Well, I should say things happened while I was behind the wheel. Partially, those were correct. It's like what the heck, dude. But it's like, what are you doing, man? It's like you're losing yourself, you're losing control of everything that you have. And the only thing I had at that point was work.
Mm.
And I just was, again, I never got up and drank in the morning. It was
Okay.
all like it was not good, you know? And so I just kept drinking. And I would, people were just noticing and things were getting back to where I was working. They're like, hey, things are happening outside of work that are affecting work directly, and that was the only thing that really was important to me. And, I had to get some time taken off from where I was working and think about my life. And during that week off, I did exactly what you shouldn't do is I got completely drunk every single day, making
Mm-hmm.
dumb decisions and uh, nobody was there for me. I felt like, even though there was, I felt
Mm-hmm.
like nobody was there for me really. And so during that week, I remember I went like out to eat, and then I was driving, and obviously I had alcohol in my system. And I kind of at that point was like, I don't even care what happens. I started speeding up really fast and going extremely fast and just like crying and couldn't really see where I was going because I was crying because I felt like at that point, I became what I hated the most, and that was my father. Because I felt like he chose, again, like I said, alcohol over me.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like alcohol took over my life. And there was factors on why I drank. And sometimes you don't understand it until you remove yourself from them. And I'm just like, what am I doing? And just like I was going really hard on the alcohol, and then all of a sudden I remember waking up one morning and my hands were shaking just like my dad. And I had that thought where I'm like, this is it. I can't do this anymore because I'm going to end up just like him. And, what's that going to do? We lost him in his 60s, lost my mom in her 60s, and I'm in my late 30s at that point. It's like, what am I going to do? end up the same way? Am I going to just be another sad story? And I'm just like, what am I going to do? I've already had so much tragedy in my life. I don't want to have any more. And I have this tattoo on my arm right now. It's 8/11/22 is the day that I woke up, and I made that decision. And I texted my boss man at the radio station that we're very close, and I was just like, because he knew what was going on with me, and I always would talk to him about what's going on in my life, and he, was part of the reason why they're like, hey, you need some time to think about this, what's going on, and they knew work was very important to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, all right, I'm gonna go ahead, and I texted him. I said, I'm gonna quit drinking, and he was like, good, because I don't want to see all that talent go down in the bottle, and it's like I'd hate to see that, and if you need some help, we're here for you. And so since 8/11/22, I've not had one sip of alcohol, and I would be open to talk about it on the radio station. I didn't want it to fall on deaf ears, so I wouldn't ever talk too much about it, but I would talk about not being dependent on alcohol to be who I am. I feel like I'm a fun individual. I didn't need alcohol to have like I didn't need that alcohol to be like, oh, it gives me confidence, loosens me up. Like it would make me just feel like I heard this in a podcast and they were talking about it. The Warren brothers, they're pretty famous songwriters, and one of them said they had the same problem with alcohol and drugs, and they're sober now. But they said at one time in a podcast, and I could totally relate. It was like, it's not the alcohol and drinking you miss; it's that escape.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah.
you have any kind of substance addiction, addiction is pretty much whenever you know it's bad for you in the long term, but you continue to do it and it only affects you short term, but it's going to affect you in the long term. And you just don't think about that. The consequences, you just kind of, oh, I know I'm going to feel like crap tomorrow because I'm going to have a hangover, but it's like, I'm going to keep doing it and I'm going to keep drinking and I'm going to take that shot. And I'm going to have that drink and I know I'm going to do dumb stuff, but it's like, you just don't care. You just want that escape.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that when they said that. I'm like, that's exactly what was happening. Like it felt like when I got a couple drinks in me, the whole real world kind of just faded into a blur in the back. And you're like, oh, I'm living on this like
Yeah.
I'm walking on, I'm gliding through the air. Like I'm not having to deal with the real world problems. And then all it does is worsen any problem you have and then cause problems that you didn't even want.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And so I haven't had any alcohol since then because I know that if I do, and I tell people whenever I Uber and do Lyft here in Nashville, I kind of tell people I'm like, oh yeah, I don't drink anymore because I'll ruin my life. Like I know for a fact that I will drink enough to do just, and I have this still in me, and I try not to let it rear its ugly head, but it's like I have this duality in me of being this party animal, bad temper, not a violent person, but just like fly off the handle, like pissed off and stuff like that, and raise my voice in me where it's like the alcohol was amplifying that. And where I just want to destroy, I just want to go out and just destroy my life. And then I have this peaceful, fun, lovable side of me. I don't know what it is, and I still have that. It's not doing any damage at the moment. Like I might get mad about something. I feel like your emotions should have their time. Like if you're happy, be happy. If you're sad, cry, be sad. Let your emotions have their time and not bottle them up is how I feel. And I think sometimes when I get angry, I really let that go.
Mhm.
And I get it, people say, oh, you can scream in a pillow and then be done with it. And it's like, well, I'm just like sometimes get really pissed off and I'm just like, I need to calm down. Like I just need, because you say things when you're angry and you don't really mean them. You're just out of anger. You say something maybe stupid and sometimes you can't take those things back. People are like, I can't believe you just said that to me. And, sometimes when you do it to strangers, it's terrible. And it's just like,
Uh-huh.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
if you can relate, it's pretty wild.
Yeah. And then, like you said, then if you added, like you just said, you destroy your life if you drink again, because when you have that too, when you drink, that's coming out worse than what it does
Hmm.
in normal. You know what I mean? And the same, I could totally relate when you said it's like an escape. For me, it was like a mask. Like it was just an escape for me. I didn't have to deal with the real life and all of that. I would drink and just be, who I was and never have to deal with anything that way, but always had to deal with consequences afterwards, you know.
Exactly. And now that I look back and I'm older and I've I feel like when I quit drinking, I just thought about this as well. I've been doing a lot of reflecting in my life. I feel like I'm 20 years younger
Mm-hmm.
since I haven't been drinking. Yeah, obviously you know, you can tell people that when they don't drink or use whatever they're using, they look youthful, they feel youthful, they feel healthy. You know, it's really about the food you put in your body after that. Are you trading one thing for another? And I think
Right.
marijuana was that for me right after I quit drinking. I was just like, oh, well, I can do this because it's not as bad. And I realized quickly that all I'm doing is trading one thing for another and I need
Mhm.
to stop. And I've always had a weight problem, always been overweight, not heavily, but pudgy, you know, the chubby cheek kid, you know. And so I feel like since I've quit drinking the alcohol, my body is looking for the sugar and I've
Mhm.
eaten a lot more sweets since then, and that's not good because that's a lot of calories if you don't pay attention, and so that's one thing you're trading off right there, and it's like, I have this addictive personality where it's like, I'll play video games for hours because I just wanna keep I'm competitive, I wanna win, and I'll be, like, obsessed with my music for hours, and that then you will start having things in your life be neglected.
Mhm.
Maybe
Mhm.
it's your animals, maybe it's your friendships, maybe it's work, maybe it's something you kinda just if you have that addictive personality where you know you cannot quit stuff, so you kinda need to set limits and boundaries and such like that, and so, um, 8, 11,
So,
22. Huh, what'd you say?
so I was just going to ask you, 8, 11, 22. So did you go into a rehab? Did you just decide to quit?
I just cold turkey quit because and it was tough, you know, I the hardest thing that I had to do was, I vividly remember this, is I went down to where I used to sit in my recliner all the time and just drink. Like, I remember one time right before I quit drinking, it was that week of it was pretty much like hell week for me, you know? It's like I remember during the week, I used to go and I used to buy, like, these really big plastic jugs of vodka, and I would pour it in a Powerade, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm drinking Powerade. That's gonna
Right.
replenish me, da, da, da," you know, and I'm drinking alcohol. But I would remember one day I opened up the fridge and I went to go pour more drink, and I'm like, "I already drank that much? Like, I just bought this."
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like, wow, but I remember I went and sat down in that recliner. I think it was on the same day, 8, 11, 22, and I sat down in the recliner, I could see my reflection in the TV, and I'm looking right at myself, and I had to say it out loud, "You are an alcoholic."
Mhm.
It isn't, "I need to get up and drink in the morning, I have shakes." You know, that day, obviously, I was experiencing the shakes, but it wasn't like an all, you know, all the time situation where I had to get the drinks in me to quit the shaking. But I had to say that I was an alcoholic. I had a problem with binge drinking. I had a problem with, you know, don't know when to stop. Like a couple of people now, I'm still amazed to this day that can go out and have a couple drinks and call it a day.
Me too.
I
Me
have no idea what kind of self control that's magic. It's
Right.
you're a magician because I don't know how you can do it. I never had that in me. It was
Me
drink, 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 and then take shots and then drink some more. Next, you know, I used to black out all the time, every
all the time.
weekend, all the time. And a lot of people said they don't. Oh, I remember blacking out once or twice, and I'm like, what? Like, you know, me
Right.
back in the day when I was drinking, I'm like, rookie, I black out all the time. It's like that's not
Right.
funny. It was
Right.
just, it was my reality.
Right.
And that I continued to go on that roller coaster of like, I don't know where this night's going to end, but I'm going to go ahead and just get drunk.
Mhm.
And, you know, the fear of waking up the next morning going, I don't know where my car is. I don't know what I did last night. You're calling and talking to people like, what did I do last night? Was I acting like an idiot? Did I do this and that? And, you know, I never was violent or anything like that. But, you know, you're saying things you don't want to. You're doing things you don't want to.
Yep. Yep, for sure.
You know, you're drinking and driving and stuff. And that's a terrible thing because that can change your life. And then hopefully it never does, but sometimes it does. It affects somebody that has nothing to do with the situation. They're just a person driving down the road
Yep.
and you end their life or you alter it forever because you made a terrible decision to get behind the wheel. And that's, I feel really guilty about all that because it's like,
Yeah,
I did that a lot
I did too. I did too.
and a
And
lot
I
of people
really
still do
felt
it.
that they do. And actually, my bonus son, my stepson, in 2012, he was in a single car drinking driving accident that he left the bar. Somebody gave him his keys back, and he left the bar, and he died in the accident, and it was drinking. You know, and the thing is, it's like you say, life altering. Whether it's you hit somebody else or you kill yourself throughout it, but it's life altering for everyone around you. You know, and I had the same guilt because I had plenty of times that I drove down the roads that I used to drive down coming home from work and stuff with these big 6 foot, 8 foot ditches going, man, God, you just had me because I definitely should not be here. So I can totally relate to that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're just like, you hear about it all the time. You're like, oh, again, and how could it happen to me? That happened to everybody else, not me. And so it's never gonna happen to me. I'm a good drunk driver, or whatever excuse you want to give yourself. And if anybody's hearing this that deals with alcohol and alcohol abuse, and it's just like, and you're alone and you feel like you're alone, I'm like, there are people that would like to willing to help. But again, it's like we were referring earlier, it's like, oh, I don't want people to look at me like I'm an alcoholic. And I'm like, well, if you think you have a problem, because I talked
Right.
to somebody on the phone one time, they're like, yeah, I think I might have a problem. If I go, if you think it, you do.
Mhm. You do. You
You
do.
do. If you're thinking like, it was like I was Ubering somebody and I was talking about the situation about me being sober now. And they were like, yeah, I drink whenever I get off work, but I feel like it's starting to become a problem. My kids are kind of noticing it. And I go, if you think that, it is.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
I go, and I'm not looking at you any different because I mean, I look in the mirror and I have to see that same person that made all them crappy decisions. And I totally relate. And I'm like, try to talk to somebody to figure it
Yep.
out. If you need to go somewhere, like I just up and quit. And it's a struggle, it's like one of those things where I go out to these things in Nashville and the writers rounds and it's the rat bars and like not for me. I'll drink. And luckily a lot of the places here have like the little Gatorade jugs and they have water. And so I could
Yeah.
have something in my hand and it's water. And they make the liquid death drinks that are water that kind of look
Right.
like they might be alcohol and
Yep.
such. And this is all leading up to why I'm in Nashville now. So I worked my butt off at the radio station and got again to being like right hand man, being dependable. You know, again, the alcohol wasn't affecting me while I was at work; it was outside of work. So I still was very dependable on and very high standard uh, for myself or as a worker. But after I quit drinking, probably a week and a half after that, I met Elissa, my girlfriend that I'm with now.
Okay.
And I love her, and she's a person that's been with me throughout this remainder of this sobriety, that I've had, and almost the entirety. Really, I mean, it was 8/11, and then we got together, like 11 days later, and so
Oh, okay.
yeah, it was right after that, and so it was one of those things. She messaged me, and then all of a sudden we went to hang out, and I'm like, dealing with this new sobriety of life, and I felt really good, and I was staying strong, and then, like, she gets put into my life, and we're still together, and she moved here to Nashville with me, so but, referring back to, like, me looking at, like, who was writing songs and this and that, I kind of was thinking about my life one day, and I'm like, "Man," I'm like, I really worked my way up to doing what I'm doing here at the radio station, but I've always been a creative, and I'm
Mhm.
like, "What if" I love songwriting. I was loving like I know who was writing the songs. I knew the stories behind them. I know who they're writing with. And I was like, what if I give songwriting a shot? I'm like, what if I write songs? So I always kind of did the whole little like, fun rappy stuff and this and that. I just never thought it was going to be anything for me. And then I was just like, I'd rather just not play the songs. I want to create the ones that are being played. Like I want to write songs. And so I took at the end of 2022, I really took it. I started reaching out to some artists that I've met, and I'm like, "Hey, man, if I really wanted to be a songwriter, what like beginning things do you think I should do?" And I started taking the steps, and I put on Facebook. I'm like, "Who wants to? Does anybody want to write?" And I found this guy that actually went to the same radio school as me. He lived down in Florida, worked at a radio station. He's like, "Well, I play guitar and piano, and I sing a little bit, and I'll write with you." And so we started writing kind of like this over Zoom, and we were writing. He's down in Florida, I'm in Kansas City, and I'm starting to write. And I feel like I've always kind of thought about things a little bit differently. And if you listen to country music, there's a lot of flip on the words, like when It Rains, It Pours by Luke Combs is not a sad song. They originally trying to write that as a sad song, but they kind of flipped the idea on its head where everything was positive. Like, what about if everything happened is when it rains, it pours, but it's positive? And it's just like those cool like ideas. And I'm like, I've always thought of stuff that way, but I always used all my wordplay and stuff like that into jokes.
Right.
And wordplay is really in the flipping the idea on its head is what country music is. And that's what really intrigued me about it. It's not actually that parallel from rap music. It's a lot of wordplay, rhyme schemes, a lot of storytelling, a lot of it maybe, fiction based on some truth. And I'm like, well, that's really not too far. And so I really started thinking about it. I was like, I like this stuff. And so I started diving deep into it. And so 2023, um, I spent that year. I'm like, I'll give myself a year on studying what it is to be a songwriter, why I love the songs I do, and start writing. And so me and my buddy started writing songs, and I would try to write with anybody I could. Not many people in Kansas City were really writing songs. Just everybody's
Right.
in Nashville, It's like
Right.
that's where the epicenter is, and that's where all the talent is. And I'm like, well, me and him write over Zoom. I'm like, if I move to Nashville, I can still write with him and write with anybody that'll write with me there and then
Uh-huh.
learn. And so I bought a guitar. My slogan since I quit drinking is talk about it, be about it.
Nice.
So if you're going to talk about it, be about it. If you're going
That's
to
right.
if you're going to talk about doing something, do it.
Right.
And then one day I had pudgy little fingers and I was like, oh, I can't play guitar. I was talking to these artists. Cause so that year I focused on like when artists would come into town, I would talk to them. I'm like, hey, I'm really thinking about like writing songs. Like I want to do it not just as a hobby. I want to do it as a profession. Like, what do you think? And I was like, I don't play any instruments. And I remember one person was like, man, there's a guy that has multiple number ones that doesn't play any instruments. And he writes a lot with Brad Paisley. His name's Chris Dubois. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so I'm like, well, then it's doable, right? And they're like, yeah, everybody in a room has their strengths. If you're a great guitar player, you're probably playing guitar. If you're doing the track stuff that you hear all the music on the computer, that person's doing that. The other person's like an idea person with the melodies and all this and that. And it's like, oh, well, I'm the idea guy.
Right.
I'm the lyrical idea guy. I can do that all day. And so I bought a guitar though, that fit my pudgy little fingers. Apparently the Fender makes a smaller neck. So I bought a guitar and I did the lessons on the iPhone with the AirPods listening. So I was learning guitar and I was like, okay, well I can learn piano too. So I bought like a Facebook Marketplace piano. I still have both of those in the corner. And then I was like, well, what about doing so everything, I still work for the radio station in Kansas City, but I'm not full time on the air. I eventually would leave there, but everything you hear on the station, I create. So I work in this program where it's multi tracks and I would create everything here. So I'm taking like a vocal voice from our voice guy and I'm plopping it in there. I'm taking pre-produced elements of music and I'm kind of fading it out and I'm doing all this. So I've been doing that since 2018. And
Okay.
that is not too far from what people do when they create music. They're just doing it with different elements. And so I'm like, I'm kind of trained more than somebody that's just picking it up for the very first time on how to do some of this. So that was very intriguing. So I bought a program and I'm doing all these things and I'm writing my buddy and I'm just like, my girlfriend and I, Elissa, she has a daughter that's 21, she had her little bit younger. And so she's around my age and Elissa is. And I was like, I want to move to Nashville. And at that point it was like, I was just telling her early, I'm like, I want to move to Nashville. I don't know if it's going to be writing songs. It's gonna be working in the record label business. Publishing is what songwriters do. They have publishing deals. So you write the best song you can, they find a song a home. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna chase after that. So the more and more I thought about it, I'm like, okay, I want to write songs, that's for sure. And we visited Nashville. And during that first visit, I was like, yep, like I told my boss, I'm like, I'm gonna move to Nashville. I just don't know when. And I was trying to let him know because I do a lot. I did a lot for the station. I did a whole lot. He relied heavily on me when, like, especially when he was out of town. I was the point person for a lot of things, and he could tell, I would be coming in going, oh man, we thought about this chorus. I'd play it for him, my buddy and I. He recorded this little part. What do you think? And he was seeing the progress from like talking about it and then being about it. He was seeing the progress of me doing that and seeing how excited. Like when I write a song and I come up with a good line or whatever, I'm like, I can't explain that feeling. It's
Right.
like I don't know what it is that I just did, but it's making me feel again.
Mm.
Like when I was drinking, I was feeling, even though I wasn't really, I felt like something was going on. I was kind of having this feeling, this feeling alive again
Mm.
in me. And so I started really studying on what it takes, the music's business side and figuring it out. And I was like, we visited one time here in Nashville, and right during that visit, I'm like, I'm moving here. And so I came back, and the first person I told was my boss. I'm like, hey man, I'm like, I'm moving to Nashville. Like it's happening. Because I knew it would happen, but I didn't know when. But thanks for letting
Right.
me know. He's like, when? So I was like, all right, my lease is up at the end of the year. Can I get half a year into the middle of 2024? Can I get half of a year and then I can make my move? They gave me 3 more months and that was it. So the end of March, time was ticking. I'm moving to Nashville. I'm gonna be a songwriter. So I'm talking to all these people that I can and anybody that would come into town to visit for the record label side. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna move to Nashville and be a songwriter. You got any ideas of what I should do? And ask them where people just get prepped, and everybody's got their different stories, and they would give me pointers, they would tell me things about like, hey, this is how the music business is. And I'm like, well, I'm slowly finding out, I do a lot of research, listen to a lot of podcasts, and so I consume a lot of knowledge, and knowledge is a lot of power in a business that's always ever changing, because you kind of want to know, okay, this is how it used to be, this is what's going on now, what can we expect in the future? It's always kind of ever changing. And I was just like, all right, let's move. And so we did. And she luckily found a job at a family practice. She's in the health field, and which is really big here in Nashville, and music's everywhere and schools are everywhere. And so I was like, well, I can drive Uber and Lyft to stay free to write songs. And then I'm still working at the radio station doing some stuff. And I know they probably didn't want me to leave because of how much I did there, but I eventually was like, this is the best thing for me. I think this is where I feel my calling, and I'm gonna head there, and still doing stuff there till this day. And I've written some songs that I'm very, very proud of. And my goal is now to put out songs myself. And so fun rap songs are what I like to call them, because I'm not talking about like, you know, guns and drugs and like that, but I also like writing country as well. So I kind of just want to put out whatever I feel like is good. And
Mhm.
so a lot of those deal with my past. It's like there's one it's we have it halfway written, me and my buddy Phil. It's like Bourbon or the Bible is the title, and it's kind of like, he's like, "Hey, do you think you would ever want to talk about that?" And I'm like, "Dude, I can write songs about being sober, about loss. I can write songs about partying because I have enough of that behind under my belt, and I'll talk about anything." And it's just being authentic and real. And so I've written some songs and I start a lot of songs, and I'll revisit, and I'll try to go back, and I still feel like I can try to right my wrongs, literally. That's a good
Mhm.
song idea right there, right my
Yeah, there
wrong.
you go. Write that down. Write your wrongs.
In a song, where I can go back and I can apologize for not being there for my mom and dad, and I'm writing a song right now that kinda deals with that. And so,
Uh-huh.
like, the more and more people I find here, there are a lot of people on that sober journey here in Nashville. There's a lot of artists that have been open about them being
Yeah.
sober, because again, in the industry, like, I was reading an article one time, it's Country Air Check Weekly made this article about someone from the radio world, the record label world, and an artist was talking about being sober because it's such an alcohol fueled industry. And so I've
Yeah.
reached out to some people that have been sober, and I remember one time talking on the radio about, it was like a year of me being sober or something like that. And I remember talking, and I was just talking about how, if you think you have a problem, try to reach out to somebody. You can talk to me, you can talk to anybody. And this one guy called, and he was like, "Hey man, I don't really know what you were talking about, but I walk into my garage and I had the radio on, and all I heard was you talking about having a problem with drinking. So I didn't hear the beginning of it, man. But I just want to say, hey, I'm proud of you for being sober. And you know what, man? Whenever you were talking, I felt like you were talking right to me." He's like, because I like drinking. I'll get a 30 pack, and my wife knows that I'm a drinker and this and that. He goes, "May I think I'm drinking too much." And I said, "Well, if you think that, then maybe you are." And he was like, "I don't know what's going on with you, man, but I felt like you were talking directly to me. Like I just stood here while you were talking." And I'm like, you know what? I have not ever talked to that guy again. And hopefully, that did something for him. Again, I didn't want to talk about it a lot. It would be brought up on the radio station because, while I
Sure.
was there, it was from August of 2022, and I left in March of 2024.
Uh-huh.
So for that time being, I was sober
Right.
and being on the radio, but I didn't want to talk about it a lot because, again, I don't want people, oh, Tater's talking about us sober again. We know
Right.
he's
Right.
sober. So I didn't talk about it a ton, but when I did, I try to make it count and make it worth something
Yeah.
when I was talking. So, um, I never went to AA. I went to one thing here in Nashville, and I never went. I felt like if I needed to, I would. And I've gotten numbers from people that like, hey, this person's been sober for like multiple decades. If you feel like you need to talk to somebody here, talk to this person. I never felt like I needed to. Obviously, there's urges of like, man, I could really just feel like I could sit in, my chair again and have some alcohol and just kind of let the world pass me by and just go hide away for a couple hours. But I'm not going to let it happen because I know that I can't.
Right.
And
Right.
if anybody's dealing with something, I hope that they feel like they can, however they can, become sober,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's doable.
Yeah. And what I think when you said that too is like when you said in the Uber and stuff, like you know that you can't go back because you know where you'll be, right? You'll be your dad again, right? And so I always, when I'm talking to people, I don't go to AA either. I believe in AA, and that's great for people. I went my first 6 weeks because I had to fill my time because my vodka was my best friend, and I had to fill time. But I always tell people, man, just remember how sick you were and why you quit. Don't ever forget that. I still to this day can remember, and I was just talking, it's kind of gross, but it's the truth, is I can remember because I vomited a lot and the yellow bile all the time. And I remember that. And now if I get sick, like with the flu or something, I get PTSD from it because I am so afraid to be that sick again. So I always keep that in my mind. Like I weighed 85 pounds when I quit drinking. I was pretty much on my deathbed, and that's why I quit, because I didn't want my son to find me like we found my dad.
Mhm.
But I will never forget that. And I'm so like, if you scroll through my TikTok, you're going to see like I go out dancing, I have fun. I just want people to know you can still live life without it. Not everybody has a problem. Like you said, there's some people that can get out there and have a drink or two, which always amazes me too. I'm like, how do you
Yeah.
do that? Like I laugh about it now. Like I bartended at the golf course I used to work at last summer, and people would leave like this much in their drink, and they leave. And I'm like, how do they do that? Back when I drank, I'd be drinking that drink they left. But and it's good to know that, yeah, it's great AA and all of that, but also when you know, you know what I mean? And people
Yep.
can use the excuses a lot of times, and I've had people do that too. Like you just said, you could go sit in the chair and just wash away the world for a while, but you know where you're going to end up, and you're going to end up washed away again. And that's what I think people need to always remember, that we could use an excuse to go drink anytime. I've been through losing throughout my since I've been sober. I lost my bonus son, I lost my mom, I lost one of my good friends, I lost my best friend, I lost my sister. But through all that, I've never had to drink or drug again. And that's what I try to remind people, that you have to use the tools that you get to get through the things. Whatever it is that you have to use. I'm a big believer, and God has been definitely my source, and I do tell that to people. But whatever it is that you use to keep sober, then you use that to keep sober, because that's what's important. You know.
Exactly. A
Yeah.
few things I wanted to touch on after now talking the entire story to early to present. Gotta say, I do love my mom and I miss her. I
Mhm.
love my dad, I miss him,
Mhm.
and I love my cat Breezy that I lost, and my girlfriend Elissa. I wouldn't be here, probably staying strong, not even chasing this dream, maybe to the fullest. I could be doing the whole talking about it, be about it, but she's been there by my side, helping me. Don't want to say I love you, Elissa. And I miss, you know, I miss the times, and I feel like a lot of regret in my life. I feel a lot of regret of wasting my 20s and 30s, and people will always be like, "Yeah, but you wouldn't be here right now if you didn't have all that happen." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know, but I still have like a lot of regret, and I'm older now, and I don't really have a whole lot to show for it, but I'm working now for it."
Mhm.
And going back, you were talking about faith. I go to a worship group every week on Music Row here every Wednesday morning, and I'm still working through all that. It's like I said, I didn't grow up with that, so I'm like, I have the
Right.
Bible app, and we're going through Romans these past weeks, and I'm just trying to figure out everything myself, and I'm learning all this, and I'm trying. But
Yeah.
I go back to that situation that I talked about earlier about my dad standing in that hotel and he had the Bible in his hand, and I think he had a sobriety coin. I can't remember exactly. That's what I feel like I remember.
Mhm.
And he was trying to talk to me.
Mhm.
And now that I'm removed from the drinking where it became a problem, people are like, hey, you'd be slurring your words on your social media on the weekends. Now it's on a Wednesday night. And it's like, I'm hearing things like that. And I'm like, oh, this is, it's just bad. And
Right.
to go from drinking every single day heavily to now being completely sober from everything, and then hearing the word, I can go back and think about that. I'm like, my dad was probably telling the truth. He probably was really trying. And I have such a hard time because I dismissed him so easily and didn't even care anything. I'm like, well, it's one of those things, one of those spiels
Mhm.
that he's
Yeah.
giving me. And I really regret that because, and I was talking to um, Dana, which is, she was, married to my dad. And she loved him and knew we talked a lot recently whenever I went to visit her. never really had the best relationship because the fact that I always felt guarded, like I should guard myself from that whole situation with the new family. And it's no, again, like I always say, it's like not a diss on people and who
Right.
they are. It's just like what I was dealing with and the only way I felt like I could deal with it.
Uh-huh.
And I was talking to her and I'm like, I wish I could have saved him. Now that I'm sober and I'm away from it, I'm like, I'm sober. He could have been sober. He could be here right now. He could be with us. We could be talking and we could be hanging out and I could help him be sober like I am. And I couldn't save him. But, she was like, we tried. He tried. Nobody could save him.
Mhm.
And it's just such a reality that hits me all the time when I think about that because I'm like, it is true. Nobody Nobody could have done anything for him, but because you can only do it for yourself. Like nobody can get you sober. I mean, maybe if they like lock you up in prison and you can't do anything and there's no way you can get alcohol and probably in prison they're doing all kinds of stuff anyway. But I'm saying if for some reason they could put you in a box and you don't go anywhere until you go out for one time and everybody's watching and you can't sneak anything, it's like that's the only way that it would happen and for somebody forcing you, but you not being locked up, the only way you're gonna do it is for yourself. And that's like I realize that now because I'm doing it,
Right. And
you
that's
know.
so factual. My sister actually, well, she had a few times this sobriety in her life, but in 2023, she decided that she was going to get sober, and she got sober in August, and she weighed 85 pounds when she got sober. And by January of that year, she was up to 124 pounds. She looked so good, and she was sober. And she was living in a sober living place. I'd pick her up every weekend, and she did so good. We went out for my 20-year sobriety dinner. We went out to dinner with a bunch of people, and she paid for her own food and was just like and looked so good, and everybody was so proud. The next day, she drank Fireball, and it was like, and I asked her, I said, why? And her response was, I'm an alcoholic, but she just never dealt with what she needed to deal with. It was just, and she just, some people just can't. And as much as, like you said, I used to try to save people all the time. And now I just try to be the light in the world and just show them. And I have people now in my life that are friends of mine that I didn't even know had drinking problems. And they'll message me and they're like, I've been sober for 6 months. Thank you for showing me that you can still live life and be happy this way. And so and the same, like your family, you want to be the one to save them, of course. And I used to have a hard time with all of this with my hope and everything like that because I was like, if I can't save my own family, how can I help someone else? And then I had to realize that, you know what, it's whoever's going to grasp onto it, and that's all I can do. So I love what you're doing. I love that you're writing the music and you're where you need to be. And I loved hearing you say that you're going to those Bible studies on Wednesday or worship thing on Wednesdays. That's awesome. And when you were talking also about like the music industry and the people in it and the people that get sober, I look up to those people so much because I know that it's got to be one of the most difficult things because of the like I love Keith Urban because I know Keith Urban's sober, Eminem. I mean, there's people out here that I just am like, good for you, because it's tough out there, I'm sure. It's constantly around you. And like you said, that Liquid Death, it kind of made me laugh because I went to Reggae Festival a couple years ago, and that was the first time I seen that can. And somebody gave it to me, and I was like, I can't drink this. They're like, it's water. I said, oh, okay. But yeah, so this has been awesome talking to you. You want to show everybody your tattoo?
Oh yeah. So the one is the 8/11/22, which is on my
Yeah.
arm. Yeah, there you go. And
There
then the Mr. Potato Head tattoo on this arm.
I love it.
You
I
can kind
love
of
it.
it's hard to see this because it's upside down. But the reason why the video, I wanted to touch back on that. The reason why the video that my name was ever brought to you, it's the song is called Out of a Dream. And I heard in a podcast that you can talk yourself out of a dream. And so the message I was saying in that TikTok, and I said, I think my TikToks, I want to share my music, but I also just like want to encourage people. It's like I felt like I was talking myself out of a dream, like I wasn't good enough, and then masking a lot of the pain and dealing with stuff in my life through alcohol. And I was like, I wrote a song about, you can talk yourself out of a dream, but at the end of the day, it's like, you know, it's interesting. It's like you can
Mhm.
talk yourself out of a dream so easily. And
Mhm.
you're like, well, I'm not good enough. And then the alcohol, and then like maybe it's a voice that it's creeping in your head. And a lot of people are going to be like, well, that's just the devil saying things like that. And it's just like, you are good enough. I just want to say, like, I'm not gonna, break down the song for you or anything like that, but I think it's just a good message where it's like you can talk yourself out of a dream, but at the end of the day, I'm like, you can still do whatever the heck you want. You can do whatever you want. You know, there are people out there that started with nothing and they're
Yeah.
making something out of themselves. So I felt like for the 20s and 30s where I wasted away and did nothing, I'm like, well, look at me now. I'm over here talking about it, being about it. I gave up a lot to come here and I'm running into people that I'm very fortunate to write songs with, and I'm getting some some stuff that I'm pretty proud of and things of that nature. And so I'm just telling anybody that you can get sober and you can stay sober and you can chase your dreams, because I'm doing it right now.
Good for you. I love that. And it's kind of ironic that we're talking about that right there when you said talk about it, be about it.
Yeah.
Because this week, 3 times, I've heard 3 different YouTube videos that I've listened to, and it's all about what's about faith. But it's like you can have all the faith in the world, but you have to take the steps and the action in order for it to work. Just like your dreams. Like you could sit back and have all these dreams and sit here and do nothing, like you said, listen to that voice. One time a friend said to me, he said, well, why haven't you written your book yet? I'm like, well, that voice in my head is like, I said, the devil's in my ear going, what makes you think you're good enough? He said, the problem is you're listening to him. And I was like, oh, you're right. And so it's that voice in our head that we do try, we listen to, and we need to not, because like you said, you are enough. And there are people out here that had absolutely nothing that are making things out of their lives because they're taking the action. And so it's just ironic that this is the 4th time this week that I've heard this. So I think, yeah, he's talking to me up there.
It's just like, even if you do a little bit, like little bit at a day, it's like, oh, you research on what you need to do. Then you're like, okay, well, make some goals that you can reach. It's like, okay, let me learn a little bit this week. Let me put it into action. Let me start doing this and that. Take steps. At least if you're taking steps every single day, those steps are going to add up.
Exactly. Exactly. So, well, Tater, I appreciate you coming on here. You had no idea who I was, and I
Yeah.
reached out, and I just love that you were here to share your story. And I know your story is going to help somebody, and I just can't wait to continue watching your journey, because I'm so excited. I can't wait to hear your songs that you write, and yeah, I'm just excited. I can't wait. One day I will come to Nashville. It's on my bucket list. So now I have a friend there that I can visit. I have 2
There you
friends,
go.
you and your girl. She's my friend now too. She just doesn't know it.
Yeah. Tour guide Tater, come on down.
There you
We'll
go.
take you
All
around and
right.
show you around, and writers rounds, and show you what Nashville's all about and what this crazy stuff that I'm chasing down to be a songwriter slash artist, put my own songs out. And for the songs that I still am going to put out some fun party songs, because I said that I have that duality in me. I kind of want to put out this whole, like, this duality of like my fun party songs, but those are for the people that still want to have fun and party. And I hope you're being safe, and I hope you realize when it becomes a problem. But I also want to put out some songs that are sentimental and tough, and they just talk about me being sober. It's like I have that duality inside of me, so I still want to be able to do both, because I feel like, I have a calling and I have a gift, and I feel like I wasted that gift for a very long time, and I don't want to waste it anymore. So, and I'm talking to you as well, whoever, anybody that's listening, I feel like you have a gift, and you feel, because we all do, and
Will
you
do.
have a passion to use that gift, go ahead. There's nothing stopping you. Take the steps every single day and talk about it, be about it.
There you go. Thank you so much. Well, you have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to Hope. I hope that you all have a great night. And don't forget, you, like Tater said, you are enough and you are worth it. And just get out there and chase your dreams. And I promise you got cheerleaders behind you and you don't even know it. Y'all have a good night. Thank
That's
you,
exactly
Tater.
right. Thank you. I hope you have a good rest of your night.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Bye bye.